Let's mold in the Central Committee. Let's cringe in the Central Committee. Let's bog in the Central Committee right now.
Anyway, Portugal, the socialists in Portugal have come up with a new idea. Portugal makes it illegal for your boss to text you after work. In game changer remote work law. Remote workers in Portugal could see a healthier work-life balance under new labor laws approved by the country's parliament. New rules approved on Friday are a response to the explosion of home working as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, Portugal's ruling Socialist Party said. Under the new rules, employers could face penalties for contacting workers outside of office hours. Companies will also have to help pay for expenses incurred by remote working, such as higher electricity and internet bills. But the amendments to Portugal's labor laws have limits. They will not apply to companies with fewer than 10 minutes, or 10 employees. Companies with fewer than 10 employees. Wow. Companies can now face fines for contacting workers outside of their normal working hours, the new rules state. Employers are also forbidden from monitoring their employees while they work at home. However, a proposal to include the so-called right to disconnect, the legal right to switch off work-related messages to the device outside of office hours, was rejected by Portuguese MPs. Companies must now contribute to expenses that workers have incurred as a result of switching to remote working. This can include bills for electricity or internet, but not water. Employers can write off these costs as a business expense. The new rules are also good news for parents of young children. They now have the right to work from home without having to arrange it in advance with their employers up until their child turns 8 years old. Measures to tackle loneliness are also included in the remote working rules, with companies expected to organize face-to-face meetings at least every 2 months. Portugal was the first European country to alter its remote working rules as a direct result of the COVID-19 pandemic in January this year. Temporary rules made remote working a mandatory option with a few exceptions and obligated employers to provide the necessary tools for getting the job done at home. But remote working during the pandemic brought new flexibility to many. Issues such as unequal access to IT equipment showed the need for the government to step in. Portugal's Minister of Labor and Social Security, Anne Menendez Godinho, told the Web Summit conference in Lisbon last week. The pandemic has accelerated the need to regulate what needs to be regulated, she said. Telework is a game changer. If we profit from the advantages and reduce the disadvantages, building a healthy remote working culture could also bring other benefits to Portugal, Menendez Godinho said, in the form of foreign remote workers seeking a change of scenery. We consider Portugal one of the best places in the world for these digital nomads and remote workers to choose to live in. We want to attract them to Portugal, she told the website. Oh, shit. Chat, I may have to move to Portugal. I'm sorry. Mike from P. Mike from P. You'll never know. I won't even change. I won't even change my name. Mike from P. Oh no. Oh no, not P. Oh no. So this story came out and it's so ridiculous. This is going to be Mike from Reading for the morning because I am so tilted on this story. I can't even tell you what to do. I could probably get dual citizenship since my mom is from Portugal. Yeah, definitely could. Your mom, you're almost certainly a citizen by birth. PT is Portugal, so Mike from PT. Oh, nice poker commentator. Nice. Wait, Biden can't do what Biden can't do on student debt and what he won't do. Activists argue that the president could cancel student debt with the stroke of a pen, fulfilling a campaign promise. Newly uncovered documents suggest that Biden has been reviewing the issue for months. Chat, I have been informed, this is real life. This is real life. That the Biden administration is going to restart student loan payments because they think that's an argument that the economy is getting better. So they're going to run on, hey, we restarted student loan payments because the economy is so good. We wouldn't have restarted the student loan payments if the economy wasn't doing great. That's their argument. Are we in hell? Are they the dumbest mothers in the planet? Biden has been in office for 40 years. He knows what can be passed and what can be passed by executive order. Oh. The White House, look what we found. This is the debt collective. Look what we found. The White House has been sitting on the legal memo about their authority to cancel student debt since April 8th. It is 6 pages long. No more excuses. It's time to hashtag cancel student debt. Occupy Wall Street, the encampment in Lower Manhattan that began and ended a decade ago, did not overturn the two-party system, eradicate government corruption, or install a socialist president. In retrospect, it was less a political movement than a laboratory for radical ideas, many of which, owing in large part to post-Occupy organizing, have since come to seem far less radical. Take student debt. In the fall of 2011, the total amount of outstanding student debt in the country had just surpassed $900 billion. A group called Occupy Student Debt Campaign took the stark moral position that all of this debt should be abolished. The current scenario in which government agencies, banks, and other private lenders set extortionate rates and extract lavish profits is corrupt and abhorrent. Collective wrote on its website, immediate forgiveness in the spirit of a jubilee, where the injustice of an unpayable debt is redeemed through a single corrective act, is the only just response to this crisis. At the time, a few Democrats supported relatively minor tweaks such as debt refinancing, but no member of Congress, not even Bernie Sanders, supported the broad-based cancellation of student loans. We were constantly laughed at. Thomas Goki, a member of the group, told me, even sympathetic people would tell us, that's a nice idea. It'll never happen. Occupy ended, but the debt cancellation idea kept evolving. I've been seeing tons of op-eds lately on MSM sites about how voters are really worried about the Dems going too far left and is scaring the admin. Never any polling or sources for the claims they're making either. Yes, because it's a right-wing effort. Arizona leftists, it's a right-wing propaganda effort. That's what they do. They have a group of flacks that are all together, and they put out these articles for them. They get written by lobbyists, and they get given to these various flacks, and they put them into papers. It's an organized campaign. Obviously, it's horseshit, and there's no evidence whatsoever that people are like, I was going to vote for the Democrats, but then they promised to pay for childcare, and then I was like, whoa, that's too far left. That's never happened. Cancel culture hasn't gone far enough until my student debt vanishes with the snap of a semi-sentient skeleton in a suit's frail fingers. What happens if you just never pay the debt until administration one day cancels it? Your credit report, your credit score is crap, and they start taking your money out of your paycheck. And you never get another, like, tax return. The amount of student debt in the country surpassed $1 trillion, then $1.5 trillion. The Occupy Student Debt Campaign tried to persuade 1 million student debtors to default openly and collectively on their loans. This failed. But this campaign eventually grew into one called Strike Debt, which later reemerged as the Debt Collective. The activists kept organizing debtors. They also started trying to convince politicians of the need for debt cancellation and tried to identify legal mechanisms that could make it happen. Our position was always that the government can and should cancel federal student debt. Astra Taylor, one of the Debt Collective's co-founders, who has contributed to the New Yorker, told me. But it wasn't until 2015 that we started doing the government's homework for them to lay out how it could be accomplished. Most people assume that any vast shift in student loan policy, such as broad-based cancellation, would require new laws. President Barack Obama, citing a lack of bold action in Congress, ordered his Department of Education to make incremental reforms, consolidating some loans and reducing some interest rates, far less than what activists wanted, but in line with what most experts thought was possible via executive action. Then, in 2016, Robin Smith and Diane Lewin, lawyers at the National Consumer Law Center, wrote a memo pointing out an obscure provision of the Higher Education Act. The provision, which has been on the books since 1965, gives the Secretary of Education the authority to enforce, pay, compromise, waive, release any right, title, claim, lien, or demand. They propose that the Department of Education, by far the largest student loan collector in the country, already had the unilateral power to modify those loans as it saw fit. Smith and Lunin suggested that the department could use this power to cancel the debt incurred by a few thousand alumni of predatory for-profit colleges, but Luke Hernice, then a law student at NYU and another co-founder of the Debt Collective, saw no reason that the department couldn't use its discretion in more sweeping ways. As far as I can tell, nothing in the current law prevents the department from using its compromised authority to cancel broad swaths or even all of its student loan portfolio. In other words, he argued, the president could order the education secretary to cancel any amount of student debt at any time without waiting for any further action from Congress. This was more of a remote hypothetical than an imminent possibility, especially given the president at the time was Donald Trump. When I first put the idea out there, I didn't expect it to go anywhere, Hernine, who is now a PhD student at Yale, told me recently, at least not in the short term. The idea started to gain some acceptance within legal academic circles. There was a lot of scoffing at first. Herneen said. Now there are still experts who disagree with my interpretation, but it's more of the along the lines of this isn't the way it traditionally works. Not, here's a clear knockdown reason why it can't work. 2 Harvard law professors, for instance, recently called Herneen's interpretation a plausible textual reading, but cautioned that any executive debt relief initiative might be tied up in court for many years. Oh no! It might get tied up in court! Oh my goodness! Oh good! Oh, caught up in court! Give the people an inch and they'll say, why can't we have free healthcare? Communism, yeah. Yeah, I would just take a reduction in interest. A 3% cap on interest rate was... Why wouldn't they just have it at 0%? Just say that people need to pay back the principal of what they borrowed. Why even make it an interest thing? In 2019, Julie Margarita Morgan, who was then a researcher at the Roosevelt Institute, a progressive think tank, called Herneen to write a white paper called An Administrative Path to Student Debt Cancellation. Earlier that year, after Morgan joined Elizabeth Warren's presidential campaign as a policy advisor, Warren announced a new plan. As president, using executive authority, she would cancel more than $1 trillion of student debt. Morgan now works at the Department of Education. Warren argued that her plan, although it looked expensive, would ultimately be a boon to the economy, prompting consumer spending and narrowing the racial wealth gap. What expensive? There's no expense. You're just tearing up a piece of paper. There's no expense. This will never pass because American culture is diametrically opposed to equality of opportunity. Actually true. Actually true. Every American, when you say to them that when you ask them about equality of opportunity, will always pretend that they're in favor of it, but they're not. The vast majority of Americans are opposed to equality of opportunity. They want their kids and their relatives to have an unfair advantage. It's a very pseudo-tribal country. It's kind of pathetic, honestly. But if you're being honest, that's the actual truth. Would ultimately be a boon for the economy, prompting consumer spending and narrowing the racial wealth gap. Most Americans are just so scared of someone else getting something that they didn't get. What if the Treasury just prints money equal to the outstanding student debt and pays it? Why would they do that? Why not just rip up the debt? Talking to a live friend, saying we should implement social housing like Vienna is right. Should poor people have a better housing than middle class? LOL. The middle class can live in it if they want. Which is what they do in Vienna. And everybody has great housing and it's cheap. Well, you should only have to pay at all if you decide to go to a private school too. No tuition should be allowed to be charged for school. Ban all tuition. Warren argued that her plan, although it looked expensive, would ultimately be a boon to the economy. Rep. Ilhan Omar, an ally of the debt collective, persuaded Bernie Sanders to get on board with broad-based debt relief, and he soon outflanked Warren. Where she proposed canceling up to $50,000 of debt, he pledged to cancel all of it. Joe Biden, then the leading moderate candidate, began getting questions about debt cancellation. As he often did during the campaign, he forged a compromise between left and center, aka he lied through his teeth. It's the means testing that makes everyone bitter to social safety nets. It leaves people out that need assistance. So whenever something is proposed like public housing, everybody thinks they won't be able to access the assistance. Also, it's usually really hard to get, and you have to wait years. I wonder if there's any data on how much of the total student loan principal borrowed has already been recouped by the banks via interest payments. I'm not sure on that. That's a good question. Biden just wants everyone to work at a parking garage to work their debt off like his totally not already a millionaire son. LOL. In April 2020, Biden pledged to immediately cancel a minimum of $10,000 of student debt per person. Oops. Hey, Joe, where's that 10 grand? Joe, you owe us all 10 grand. He didn't specify whether he would do this through executive action or by urging Congress to pass a bill, though the word immediately seemed to imply the former. During his first month as president at a CNN town hall in Milwaukee, Biden was asked how much debt he planned to cancel. He spoke for several minutes, mentioning that one of his sons had graduated from Georgetown and Yale Law School, $142,000 in debt, but that he had paid it off in part by working for a parking service down in Washington. That same son, of course, also earned astronomical sums of money while working for a hedge fund, lobbying for various companies, and serving on the board of a Ukrainian national gas company, but Biden happened to admit those details. Hunter. Finally, he concluded, I'm prepared to write off the $10,000 debt, but not 50, because I don't think I have the authority to do by a sign of the pen. See, he's such a lying sack of shit. There's no principled legal reason you could get rid of 10 but not 50. It's not in the law. There's no 50 anywhere. He's making it up. He's just a liar. This is the thing that makes people hate Democrats. And I agree with them. I despise you if you're a lying sack of shit. He's a cowardly lying sack of garbage. A disinformation spreading piece of trash. He could just say, hey, I don't want to forgive your student loan debt. But he's a whiny little coward. Like every liberal is, which is why they're despised and why he's got a 38% approval rating on the way down. By the way, 4% unemployment rate, 4.8. Ah, man, when we get the next recession, he's gonna hit sub 20 approval. This guy is going to be destroyed. When the Republicans are in control of the House and the Senate, and then the recession hits, he might actually get impeached and removed. I wouldn't be surprised. Democrats voting to remove him would not surprise me. He appeared to be suggesting that the president has the power to cancel student debt up to but not beyond some unspecified amount of money, an interpretation that is at best legally ambiguous, aka he's lying. He's a lying sack of shit. Members of the debt collective were both encouraged and dispirited. They had moved their proposal from the fringes to the mainstream more quickly than they thought possible. And yet, for all their momentum, they wondered whether they were running into a brick wall. They could make the legal arguments. They could get their allies hired by the administration. They could even draft an executive order, but they couldn't make the president sign it. Some activists thought the problem was ideological, that Biden, a son of a corporate Delaware, believed deep down in the free market, not a free ride. Or perhaps he was waiting for his lawyers to tell him what he could do. On April 1st, in an interview with Politico, Ron Klain, Biden's chief of staff, was asked whether Biden planned to cancel student debt via executive action. Klain said the Department of Education was preparing a memo on the president's legal authority. Hopefully we'll see that in the next few weeks. And then he'll look at that legal authority, he'll look at the policy issues around that, and he'll make a decision. A few weeks passed, then a few months. Biden's press secretary, Jen Psaki, was asked several times in June and August and October whether the legal review was finished. What it concluded, I don't have an update on that, she said. Jen Psaki, you're a vile piece of garbage. What a lying sack of shit. Who could like these people? Who could like these people? I seriously wonder, how could you like this person? How could you like the Bidens? How could you like Jen Psaki? Whenever I see someone like Jen Psaki, that's like the biggest red flag. They like being gaslit. They like being lied to. I don't want that kind of psycho in my life. You like Jen Psaki, that's a deal breaker. The debt collective activists developed a theory that the lawyers at the Department of Education had already written their memo and that they had advised Biden that he did have the authority to cancel debt and that the administration was keeping the memo quiet because they didn't like its conclusions. But this was mere speculation. So Goki, one of the organizers, submitted a request through the Freedom of Information Act. If the memo had already been drafted, then he asked the Department of Education to send it to him. On August 20th, he got the results. Dozens of pages of emails among Department of Education's officials, including a 7-page memo called Secretary's Legal Authority for Broad-Based Debt Cancellation. The memo's contents were redacted in hot pink for some reason, but it was proof that a memo existed. I really felt this version was excellent, the General Counsel of the Department of Education wrote on April 5th. 3 days later, the word draft was removed from the memo's header. This all seems to vindicate the activist theory. After reviewing Goki's documents, I asked both the White House and the Department of Education whether the department's internal legal review was complete, but I did get a specific answer. Joe Biden deserves to lose. This is something that I tweeted this morning, chat. And I tweeted it this morning and I really feel it, which is this. My only regret is that I wasn't even more toxically anti-Biden Harris during the primary. This is likely the last chance we'll have for over a decade to pass any major legislation. I attack the most every day on policy. We should have been more ruthless. I think that, for example, when Hassan made that video about Kamala Harris laughing about arresting homeless mothers, we were too nice. We were too nice. We should have been meaner. This makes me want to sell NFTs of my Twitch streams even days after calling them a scam. Nor is it clear whether if Biden's lawyers do conclude that he has the authority to cancel a large or unlimited amount of student debt, is he is willing to use that authority. The Department of Education continue to work in partnership with colleagues at the Department of Justice and the White House to review options with respect to debt cancellation. A White House official told me the president continues to look into what debt relief actions can be taken administratively, but those steps take time. The debt collective was unmollified. We're a signature away from wiping out everyone's federal student loans, and Biden apparently just doesn't want to. We've given him a magic wand, a way to help millions of people and get them excited to come out and vote for him. Who wouldn't want to do that? The president's party almost always loses seats during a midterm election, which would mean in this case that the Democrats would lose control of one or both houses of Congress next year. A way to prevent that, Asher Taylor said, would be to materially improve people's lives in ways that are intelligible for them. And believe me, if you cancel 45 million people's debt, they will notice. On Friday, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez wrote on Instagram that now is the time to bring the heat on Biden to cancel student loans. He doesn't need Manchin's permission for that. And now, the two bills that make up most of Biden's agenda are still stalled in Congress. They might soon pass in some form. They are likely to be Biden's last major legislative accomplishment before the midterms, if not the last one of his presidency. After that, if Biden wants to get big things done, he will have to do most of them via executive order. But if the protracted and bitter struggle over debt cancellation is any indication, Biden's base may want to temper its expectations. In early 2020, Taylor, who is also a filmmaker, made a short documentary called You Are Not Alone. We filmed it in February when the Bernie dream was still alive, she said. What happened over the next year and a half? Biden's campaigning on a promise of broad-based debt cancellation, but as president hesitating to deliver, struck her as disappointing but not shocking. The only thing that does continue to surprise me, she said, is the Democratic Party seems so unwilling or unable to act in its own self-interest. The Secretary's legal authority for broad-based debt cancellation. What's the legal rationale for this to be redacted? There is no legal rationale for that to be redacted. Could the Supreme Court slap down an executive order geared toward debt based on what theory? If student loans were reduced to principal borrowed, it would cut mine in half, and I'm talking over 100K. Why not do that? Why not do that? If you still think that, oh, well, they should pay back what they borrowed, reduce them all to principal.